Strange design, Toman said, looking at the ship on the view screen. I'm in this job for hell knows how long, and I don't remember such a layout. I wonder who built it. It's not an Earth design, and it's not Solpadian. Why would we care? Boleslav replied. His hands rested on the main pilot's control panel, confidently leading the tugboat to the abandoned ship drifting in space. We keep to our side of the deal, fly in, pick it up, deliver it to the right place, and get our money. I've seen so many weird ships throughout my life. Nothing surprises me anymore. No, this one is special, Toman persisted. Look at it. There's no logic in it at all. Where's the propulsion group? Where's the living quadrant? Where are the cargo bays? If this is a cargo ship, of course. It's just a random pile of weird stuff. Bro, don't you have something better to do? I think it's about time someone turned on the mass detector and neutron scanner and started calculating the traction field. I'm sorry, but we can't get this thing to the Clyford shipyards pulling it with tow rope. We have a specific order, and you know better than me that the penalties for not fulfilling the contract are pretty sick. We just can't afford them now. Toman looked at the strange ship again. He knew that Boleslav was right. If it had truly been an alien ship, they wouldn't have sent 2 laborers on an old tugboat. If they suspected a precursor ship, they would have sent a full patrol mission, including a proper research team. The federal authorities were looking really bad at somebody trying to pull an unauthorized appropriation of precursor artifacts. Especially since, for all its strange appearance, the ship looked neither like a precursor artifact nor a relic of the Qatar. All right, Toman said, but I still want to get a closer look at it. It's 2 weeks to Clyford with this thing on our back, so I'll have time. Boleslav shrugged. It's up to you, though I think it's a bit of a drag to go through old junk. You can go there if you're so keen, but I'll pass on that. I wouldn't expect you to, Toman said. Your curiosity seems to have completely atrophied with age. Don't worry. I've already gotten the preliminary data and run the first round of calculations. For such a shapeless vessel, the traction field strength is remarkably economical. I'll double-check everything, of course, but it looks like we'll be able to save on fuel cells as well. By the way, who tipped Clyford off to this thing? Boleslav hummed approvingly, responding to the news about fuel economy, then displayed a letter on the screen with the text of a standard order from the Clyford shipyards to deliver derelict property there. Interesting, he said. It doesn't say anything, but as far as I know, they don't scout for junk themselves. They have enough work to do. After all, they're the main scrapyard in the sector. They only take small stuff if they get a chance. Maybe somebody accidentally stumbled upon it and sold them the coordinates? Boleslav scratched his head. Everything is possible. But as I said, what do we care? Let's get the traction field synchronization ready. We're almost there. The sooner we get it done, the sooner we'll have something more substantial than wind and beer caps in our pockets. The derelict ship still hung in the middle of the screen, an ugly cluster of technological madness. The traction field syncing went off without a hitch. Even Boleslav agreed that it had been a long time since they had been so successful on the very first try. Not an easy task, as it was necessary to calculate very precisely a lot of parameters resulting from the centers of mass of both ships, their geometry, and other special data. According to these parameters, the topology and strength of the traction field were calculated, which united the tug and the ship, or station, or asteroid. The tug could drag any space object within the limits of its engine's power, of course, into a single hole. There was no other way to drag a large object without its own working engines into hyperspace. The desynchronization of reality at the entrance to hyper would destroy any physical connection between the tugboat and the towed object, even if it was a cable made of almost eternal precursor materials. You know, now even I'm wondering what this thing is, Bolslav said. I don't remember such a successful pairing for a long time. And this despite the fact that the ship looks like those stupid psycho sculptures, or whatever they call this modern art nonsense. Now that the ships were connected by the traction field into a single whole, it was possible to see the strange details of the mysterious abandoned ship. Up close, the ship looked even more unusual than it had from afar. It was 3 times the size of the tugboat, so not everything was visible, but the part they saw was striking in its strange and inefficient layout. It was as if a child had taken several toy blocks and joined them together with sticks. Yet the entire structure was remarkably ergonomic in terms of jumping through hyperspace. This, Toman tapped his finger on one of the screens that displayed a close-up of one of the towed ship's modules. Looks like typical welds, although the hull panels seem to be of individual shapes, more like a puzzle. Who builds like this? Some do, Bolslav said. Old Sulpadian ships look like patchwork quilts too. I'm more confused about something else. Antennae, no superstructures, or for that matter any hint of airlocks. It's like a sarcophagus. Remember that old Tofane generation ship they found in the Zeta sector? Toman asked. It too was sealed up tight and had no sensors. They were supposed to arrive at the place after a certain time, and then they'd be unsealed. But until then, there was nothing to look at. Only something went wrong, and they all died. I saw a movie about the research on that ship, Bolslav said. It was creepy. 1,000-year-old crypt. Anyway, it's not the case, Toman said. An ark ship supposed to be a giant, not this miserable pile of garbage. I think we just need to study everything properly. There are probably airlocks, but we just can't see them. Bolslav only shrugged his shoulders. He always was taunting Toman as a naive adventurer. Toman was okay with that. A little healthy romanticism never hurt anyone, especially in such a dull job as towing space debris for recycling. The 2 ships, joined together by a traction field, arrived at the jump entry point without adventure. Toman sat at the control panel of the jump engines, monitoring the readings. So far, everything has been going exactly according to the estimated schedule. Boleslav was reviewing the shipyard's contract for the strange ship's delivery. Despite Toman's numerous attempts to convince the old pilot that it made no sense for big shipyards to cheat on small private contractors, Boleslav was sure that from time to time big companies put all sorts of unexpected clauses in the standard contracts in small print to make more money. Just a couple more minutes and we can relax, Toman said. The jumpers are almost ready. So, have you found the clause that will sell our souls for 1,000 years to whoever? Listen, there's some nonsense here, Boleslav answered, and the unconcealed anxiety in his voice made Toman wary. I got a bad feeling about it. Toman turned to Boleslav, still monitoring the timetable of the jump with the corner of his eye. What have you got there? He asked. Has Kleifert really decided to cheat us all of a sudden? No. It doesn't look like it. I'm not sure. Boleslav shook his head. It's standard general contract, all cool and stuff. But the coordinates of the docks where the order should be delivered. What about them? I only took a glimpse and then threw the link to the contract directly into the navigator. As always, the outer ring, dismantling docks 6th through 12th, whichever is free on arrival. What's not to your liking? Boleslav jabbed a finger at his screen. That's it. It's not the usual shit. At first, I thought I saw the regular crap, like you. And now, look for yourself. He pressed a key and displayed the last page of the contract. Toman stared dazedly at a few haphazard groups of numbers mixed with strange, unfamiliar symbols. What the hell is this nonsense? Boleslav spread his hands. You tell me. But I'm much more concerned about something else now. What did you put in the navigator? This? He said, pointing at the screen. You say we're on schedule to jump point? But where are we heading? Oh, shit. Toman rushed to the console, but it was too late. The universe around them shimmered, and the tugboat and the strange ship attached to it jumped into hyperspace. Coming to his senses, Toman did not know what was wrong, though the feeling of impropriety of what was happening around him did not pass. He was lying in complete darkness and silence on a hard, flat surface. There were no familiar sounds. The noise of ventilation and radiators, the beeping of electronics, the whirring of servo mechanisms, all the background noise usual for a spaceship. He heard only his own breathing and the pulsation of blood in his temples. Anxiety quickly made itself felt. Toman breathed more frequently. It seemed to him that his breathing had split into two, but he immediately realized that it was just Boleslav breathing somewhere nearby, and opened his eyes. It turned out that he had been a little mistaken. It wasn't complete darkness that surrounded him, but complete nothingness. No objects or light source. The dimmed light was just there. The body was telling Toman that he had solid support beneath him and the air around him, but his eyes did not confirm this separation of the elements in any way. He sat up and saw Boleslav lying beside him with his eyes closed. As soon as Toman leaned toward his friend, the old pilot stirred, opened his eyes, and sat up. "What the hell is this?" he said. The words sounded unusually muffled, as if in an acoustic chamber. "Where are we, and where is our ship?" "I wish I knew," Toman replied. "I woke up a minute before you did. The last thing I remember is entering the jump at these nonsense coordinates. And then I'm waking up here. I have no idea where this here is." Boleslav stood up with a groan. Toman, not to feel like an idiot, sitting on the invisible floor and looking up at the pilot, followed. "Well, we got the air here," Boleslav said. "That's a good thing. Whoever caught us obviously didn't plan to finish us off right away." Toman's heart throbbed unpleasantly. "Caught? What makes you so sure we were caught?" "How else to explain it? We, like the last fools, fell into this trap ourselves. We put some mumbo-jumbo into the navigator, jumped to some unknown place, and passed out. And while we were unconscious, someone took us out of the ship and put us into this unknown thing. Do you have any other versions?" One possibility came to Toman's mind. They both died and went to the afterlife. But it was so stupid that Toman didn't even smile. "So what are we going to do?" Boleslav thought a bit. "Let's move," he said. "We must try to find a way out of here. If we find the door, then behind it, we find the one who organized all this." "Where to?" Boleslav swore through his teeth. "It doesn't matter. We can't see shit. Let us find the wall first, and then we'll see." An hour later, they stopped. It felt crazy, as if they hadn't moved at all. Walking in this void was incredibly strange, as there was no indication that they were actually moving. If it weren't for their tired legs and thirst, one might have thought they were imagining it. Even the sense of time was lost unless you checked the clock every 2 seconds. "It doesn't make sense," Boleslav said. "We've traveled a good distance, to what results? You and I don't even cast a shadow. Maybe we were somehow uploaded into the virtual reality." "You've read too much tabloid crap," Toman said. "Virtual reality, my ass. How do you envision it? Like someone managed to intercept us right at the moment of hyperjump, somehow knock us out, and then conduct a complex operation to directly connect our consciousness to virtual reality. Okay, I could possibly understand if we were some fat moneybags, but why would someone spend a fantastic amount of money to do something like that to 2 penniless co-owners of a beat-up old tugboat?" I guess you're right, Boleslav said. But then, how do you explain all of this? He put his hand around the ever-gray emptiness. I don't know. Damn, I'm thirsty, and I'm exhausted. We won't last like this for long. We have air here, and we can survive without food. But what about water? Yup, my throat is dry too, Boleslav agreed. And the more we are walking blindly around, the more fatigue and dehydration will multiply each other. Both of them were silent. There was no point in repeating the obvious. If they didn't find water, they wouldn't have much chance of solving the mysteries of the strange place they had come to. And how could they find water where there was nothing, literally? Can't believe we're destined to perish like this in the middle of nowhere, Toman thought, looking at the frowning Boleslav. Suddenly, the old pilot's eyes widened, and his face lit up with genuine amazement. Toman even turned around, thinking that Boleslav had seen something, but saw the same emptiness. What happened? Boleslav did not answer immediately. He bowed his head slightly, as if listening to something, then grabbed Toman by the sleeve of his overalls. It's all gone, he said. It's gone. Toman looked at him incomprehensibly. The thirst. I don't feel it anymore. Boleslav looked around himself, as if expecting to see an extra pair of limbs. And fatigue, too. And I don't want to eat anymore, as if I had just filled myself up at the best fancy restaurant. Toman had already opened his mouth to ask if Boleslav went mad, but suddenly realized that he was feeling better too. The dryness in his mouth was gone, his body relaxed, and his leg muscles felt supple again. His stomach felt pleasantly heavy, like after a solid meal, and even on his tongue there seemed to be a pleasant, though indefinable, aftertaste. What the hell was that? Toman looked around vigorously. Nothing. Listen. Boleslav suddenly squinted slyly. I don't know what this place is, but I think I'm beginning to understand how it works. We were thirsty, right? And that suddenly got fixed, but not before we've said it out loud. Same with food and fatigue. What are you implying? I'm not implying. I'm saying. What if wishes come true here? Toman looked at his friend suspiciously. Is he crazy or what? I think you're a little old to believe in magic, Toman said. Boleslav shrugged. Then explain the trick with thirst and hunger. In any case, what do we have to lose? Who knows? We might even manage to get back on the tugboat. Half an hour later, they found out 2 facts. 1. Boleslav was not crazy. Toman was sure of it, because Boleslav could only spew such a masterly swearing of frustration out of himself if he was in his right mind. 2. Wishes did not come true. The mysterious void did not bestow them with 1,000,000 Federation credits, nor a luxurious gravity bed, or a couple of hot beauties in the description of whose anatomy Boleslav put all his soul. Same with a villa on the seashore, an interstellar yacht, their tugboat, and even as little as a 6-pack of cold beer. Boleslav lowered himself to the floor, indistinguishable from the rest of the space, and sat down cross-legged. You know, I've lived long enough not to believe in any religion, but if I did, I'd be faced with a hard choice right now. Are we dead or alive? Are we in heaven or hell? Toman grinned unhappily, sitting down on the nothingness opposite his friend. I won't answer the first question, he said. But as for the second, imagine we're going to be here forever. Nothing around, food on a schedule, and so on hour after hour, day after day, year after year. You could jump into any cauldron of infernal tar to avoid such a fate as happily as into a swimming pool at the best resort. Boleslav rubbed his forehead. My head is beginning to ache from all this. He threw back his head and shouted into nowhere. Hey, you there, make it not hurt. Toman watched him curiously. Well? He asked after a pause. Boleslav shrugged again. Not bloody working, and I don't have a first aid kit with me. I hate it when my head gives me big time. You know what? I'll try to crash for an hour or two. It's an old-fashioned way to cheat the pain. Toman poked his finger into the gray nothingness. Isn't it a little creepy to sleep in a place like this? Look, I've already exhausted my limits on the creepiness here, Boleslav replied, and lay down, tucking his hands under his head. If you're so scared, you can be on watch. Then I'll take my turn while you sleep. And he closed his eyes. Toman truly envied the old pilot, though Boleslav's ability to relax like that in the most tense moments was not a novelty to him. Alas, Toman himself was not trained in such a trick. Once adrenaline got into his bloodstream, it roamed all over his body for a long time, keeping him on high alert for anything. In the distant past, when Toman was still in the patrol, sometimes he'd gone 2 or 3 days without any stimulants when things got tense. At this thought, he suddenly realized his eyes were slipping shut. It was unusual, and therefore suspicious, but the sudden urge to sleep became unbearable. He instinctively tried to resist, but after a few seconds, his whole body collapsed, and his consciousness drifted somewhere very far away. Tufal VIII formed a small, reassuring clot from his ectoplasmic shell and directed it toward his wife, whose aura was clearly illuminated with dark tones of anxiety and concern. "Don't worry, dear," he said, though of course his speech had nothing to do with sound waves. "Children have to learn. Active exploration of the world is wonderful." Anviela IV gratefully accepted the blob into her personal outer field, and her aura brightened a little. "But he's still so small," she said. "Aren't we putting him in the classrooms too soon? All the other children there are at least 3 or 4 cycles older than he is." Tufal VIII replied, with a slight red flash of unawareness, though he was already thinking of something else. "I think our boy has a wonderful future ahead of him. The urge to learn at such a young age requires additional development incentives, and paradoxically, my absent-mindedness about the service puncher has proved to be just such a stimulus. I'm wondering if it's time for us to purchase a demiurge starter kit for our son after he completes elementary school. Then he can study over the vacations and go into the next stage with a good amount of experience." A demiurge starter kit was just what he needed. He would have to be on his best behavior until the end of the stage. It's a pity, of course, that he had to let the samples go. They turned out to be very amusing and multi-social, and Father will now put away the puncher into the safe box. But it would have been nice to get more samples in advance. Edison VII didn't want to experiment with the kit on artificial models. It would be so boring. A thought suddenly flashed through his mind, and he even excitedly turned orange. His mentor had once said that samples from secondary realities usually retain a subtle connection with their demiurges for a lifetime after personal contact. Of course, he wasn't the author of that reality, or even a real demiurge, and the contact was one way. Still, there was a chance. Edison VII took his trap, which he had crafted out of a child's construction kit. Without the reality puncher, he couldn't send it where it needed to go, but the geometry was still the same. What if he used it as an antenna? All he needs to do is tweak the topology a bit here and there. Toman realized everything was fine before he even opened his eyes. The smells, the sounds, even the familiar slight shiver that traveled across the bunk, everything told him he was on a normal spaceship, a patrol ship to be exact, and even more specifically, in the sickbay of that ship. Looking around, he felt a wave of relief. He had once served on such a patrol ship. Naturally, he had memorized its structure for the rest of his life. When he'd left the patrol, He'd promised himself that he'd never set foot on those flying barracks, as he dubbed them. But now the odors, sounds, and interiors that had once bothered him seemed like home. He sat up, listening carefully to his condition. Everything seemed to be okay. A few seconds later, the door to the compartment opened, and a man in a patrol uniform with medical service insignia entered. "Oh, you're finally awake," the doctor said. "Your friend seems to be waking up too. He's right here, in the next compartment." He waved his hand. "Sorry, we only have single patient pods in the infirmary, so we couldn't put you two together." Toman nodded understandingly. "I know. I served on one myself," he said, and the doctor smiled. "Tell me, what happened to us?" The doctor looked at him questioningly. "We hoped you would tell us. We picked you up by accident. Your tugboat was drifting in semi-conservation mode near a little-used hypernode in a system that doesn't even have a name, only coordinates in the navigational database. We were just passing by on our way to our station. You weren't answering, and eventually the captain ordered us to perform a full check on a tugboat. That's where we found you, both in some sort of half-coma, and brought you here." "And the ship? The one we were towing?" "What ship?" the doctor asked. "There was nothing there." Toman wondered. Maybe it was all just a dream or a hallucination. There was no ship, no gray void, just that he and Boleslav had been poisoned by something and were delirious. He suddenly felt an acute need to find out for sure. A red dot flashed on the doctor's communicator. The doctor touched his ear, switching on the communication channel. His face suddenly looked worried. "Excuse me," he said in a different tone of voice. "Something's happened on the bridge. I have to go. Get some rest. You'll need your strength." He suddenly froze with a slack jaw. "What is it?" Toman asked, getting out of bed. "You're glowing," the doctor said, pointing to Toman's hands. Toman lowered his gaze. Indeed, a steady, strong orange glow came from his hands and his whole body. "The bridge reported that—" the doctor started to say, but Toman interrupted him with a powerful punch to the jaw. "I know what they reported," he said, stepping over the doctor's body. He had already made contact with Boleslav's aura and knew that the old pilot had made all the preparations. All that remained was to enter the proper coordinates. Toman knew they had to deliver the samples, and then they would find out everything,